Welcome to our channel. I'm so glad you're here with us today. In this space, we share incredible stories filled with emotion, inspiration, and unforgettable moments. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers all around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the special story we have in store for you tomorrow. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Let's dive into today's journey together. Royal Guard's heart-pounding decision to save a dog at Buckingham Palace. The sun hung high over Buckingham Palace, casting its golden rays through the ornate gates and onto the cobbled courtyard. It was a picture-perfect afternoon in London, and the usual crowd of tourists had gathered to catch a glimpse of the Queen's Guard in their ceremonial duties. Cameras clicked non-stop, capturing the iconic red uniforms and towering bearskin hats as voices rose in cheerful chatter around them. Laughter filled the air as children pointed excitedly at the stoic figures standing like statues, their eyes fixed on the horizon, as if untouched by the bustling world around them. Among the crowd was an elderly woman, walking slowly but steadily, her steps measured with the grace of someone who had seen many years. Her small terrier, Max, trotted along by her side, full of boundless energy. The little dog darted this way and that, sniffing curiously at the feet of the onlookers, tail wagging in pure joy. It was a sight that added warmth to the already sunny day. But, as fate would have it, Max had more than a little curiosity, and, before anyone could react, he slipped his leash. Max squeezed through a narrow gap beneath the iron gate, his small frame disappearing into the restricted grounds of the palace. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The little dog, oblivious to the danger around him, wagged his tail excitedly as he ventured further into the palace's forbidden areas. It was clear he was having the time of his life, running toward the royal steps with no care in the world, unaware of the heavy security protocols that governed this hallowed ground. In the distance, guardsmen stood, their eyes fixed in disciplined focus. One, in particular, Guardsman Oliver Thomas, stood at attention under the scorching summer sun, his gaze unwavering. Though trained to remain motionless, his sharp eyes noticed the sudden movement behind the gates. Max, the little dog, now dangerously close to the royal steps. The situation, though unusual, was clear. An unauthorized entry. And while it might have been an adorable sight, it was a potential security breach. The elderly woman's voice trembled as she called out to Max, her desperate plea barely audible over the growing murmur of the crowd. "Max, come here, please," she cried, her voice laced with worry. But Max, nose to the ground and lost in his world of scent, was too distracted to hear her. For Oliver, years of disciplined training quickly kicked in. His instincts sharpened, and despite the strict rules that dictated the guards remain composed, he recognized that this wasn't just about following orders. This was a living creature in danger, and someone had to act. Without hesitation, Oliver broke formation. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on him as he advanced carefully, trying not to startle Max further. His polished boots clicked softly against the stone path as he closed the distance between them. Max, sensing movement, bolted toward a row of ceremonial shrubs. Oliver, anticipating his next move, quickened his pace. His mind calculated the dog's trajectory, and in one fluid motion he crouched down, extending his gloved hands toward Max. The little dog darted to the left, but Oliver had already anticipated this move. With practiced precision, he scooped Max gently into his arms. The crowd erupted into applause, and a collective sigh of relief echoed through the air. The elderly woman, tears welling up in her eyes, reached out to take Max from Oliver's arms. Thank you," she cried, clutching the little dog close to her chest. Oliver gave her a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of the moment, before he returned to his post, his expression unchanged. His training had taken over, and his duty was never to falter. As order was restored, the crowd continued to buzz with excitement. Phones were raised, capturing the heroic moment, and as the video clips of the brave royal guard cradling the tiny dog spread across social media, they quickly went viral. Headlines popped up across the internet. Royal Guard saves. Puppy at Buckingham Palace. Heroic guard rescues dog from palace grounds. News anchors couldn't resist sharing the story, their voices brimming with admiration for the calm and quick-thinking guard. The story continued to spread, with people from all over the world expressing their admiration for Oliver's actions. "That's true British spirit," one user commented. Another added, "Finally, something to smile about today." Oliver, though, returned to his duties as if nothing had happened. His posture remained as disciplined as ever, giving no hint of the emotional moment that had just unfolded. But beneath his stoic exterior, there was a quiet sense of fulfillment. His actions had not only protected the dog, but had also touched the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and Buckingham Palace was bathed in twilight, a quiet reflection settled over the scene. The grandiosity of the palace and its traditions had been the backdrop for a simple, yet profound moment, a reminder that behind the pageantry and ceremony, there are those who carry not just duty, but heart. The story of the brave guard and the little terrier would live on, cherished by all who had witnessed it, a timeless moment where humanity and tradition had walked hand in hand. As the elderly woman's voice trembled in the air, desperately calling for her dog, Max, the crowd fell into a hushed silence. Every eye was fixed on the small terrier, now dangerously close to the royal steps, his tiny paws tapping lightly against the cobblestones. Some shouted after him, others gasped in disbelief. Max, however, was oblivious to the commotion around him. His nose was to the ground, tail wagging furiously as he followed the invisible trail of scents that seemed far more exciting than the growing tension around him. The tourists, their faces filled with concern, could only watch as the situation escalated. The guard, still standing at attention, was the only one who hadn't been distracted by the chaos. Guardsman Oliver Thomas, his sharp blue eyes scanning the surroundings, noticed the danger almost immediately. It wasn't unusual for dogs to wander near the gates, but this was different. Max wasn't just near the boundary. He was on the restricted palace grounds. And he was dangerously close to crossing the line that no one, human or animal, was supposed to cross. Oliver's training kicked in instinctively, a rush of adrenaline surging through his body. He had been through countless drills, countless hours of standing still and perfecting his composure. But this was something else. A small, defenseless creature was about to wander further into an area it didn't belong, with no idea of the dangers lurking beyond. His duty was clear, yet complicated. The protocol said to stand firm, to remain still. But what about the life of this little dog? His thoughts raced, and with a subtle shift, Oliver broke his formation. The change in posture was almost imperceptible, but to those watching, it was a signal. He was about to act. He stepped forward slowly, keeping his movements calculated, careful not to startle Max. The crowd, sensing the guard's movement, held their breath. Some of the tourists who had been cheering moments before now stood frozen, watching the unfolding drama. Max, meanwhile, continued to bound toward a row of low shrubs, oblivious to the seriousness of the situation. Oliver's boots clicked quietly on the cobblestones, each step bringing him closer to the dog. He was acutely aware of the protocol he was about to defy, but the urgency of the moment left no room for hesitation. With every step, his mind worked quickly, calculating Max's next move. The little dog darted to the left, but Oliver had already anticipated it. In one swift motion, Oliver crouched down and extended his gloved hands toward the frantic terrier. Max bolted in the opposite direction, but Oliver's reach was just enough. He scooped the dog up gently, cradling him with the kind of care that seemed out of place for a royal guard. The crowd, who had been holding their collective breath, released a collective sigh of relief. Applause rang out, echoing through the courtyard as Oliver stood up, holding Max securely in his arms. The elderly woman, who had been standing in shock just moments before, rushed forward with tears streaming down her face. Her hands shook as she reached out to take Max from Oliver's arms, her voice cracking with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, barely able to form the words. "Thank you so much." Oliver, ever composed, gave a subtle nod, acknowledging her gratitude, but his expression remained unchanged. He handed the dog over to her, the crowd continuing to applaud, and then, just as smoothly as he had broken formation, he returned to his post. His boots clicked against the cobblestones once more, and his eyes returned to their familiar, stoic gaze ahead. For the tourists who had witnessed the rescue, the moment felt surreal, as if the boundaries between reality and the world of royal ceremony had blurred for a brief, unforgettable instant. Phones were raised, recording the emotional exchange. Videos of Oliver cradling Max in his arms quickly made their way across social media, spreading like wildfire. The headlines soon followed. Royal Guard saves puppy at Buckingham Palace. Heroic Guard rescues dog on palace grounds. Within hours, the story had gone viral. People from all over the world chimed in, sharing their admiration for the Guard's quick thinking and compassion. "That's true British spirit," one commenter wrote. "Finally, something to smile about today," said another. The elderly woman, holding Max tightly to her chest, stayed at the gates a little longer, her eyes filled with gratitude as she watched Oliver return to his post. For Oliver, the moment was already over. He had done his duty, both as a guard and as a compassionate human being. His mission wasn't about recognition or applause, but the quiet satisfaction that came from doing the right thing. The sun continued to shine over Buckingham Palace, but now, it felt as if the whole world had witnessed something truly special. A moment when bravery, compassion, and duty had all come together in perfect harmony. As the elderly woman stood, trembling with relief, still clutching Max in her arms, the air around them seemed to thrum with an energy that hadn't been there moments before. The crowd that had been anxiously watching the scene unfold erupted into applause, their cheers echoing against the majestic walls of Buckingham Palace. It was as though the ordinary moment had suddenly become extraordinary, a small act of kindness, captured in the midst of royal tradition. Oliver, however, remained as composed as ever, his expression never faltering. His years of training in the Queen's Guard had prepared him for many things, standing motionless for hours, resisting the impulse to react to the chaos around him, and remaining disciplined in the face of it all. But this moment, this brief break from protocol, was something different. It wasn't about duty, it was about humanity. He had seen a creature in danger, a life that needed saving, and without a second thought, he had moved to protect it. The elderly woman, still wiping away tears, looked up at Oliver, her eyes brimming with gratitude. Thank you so much," she said, her voice trembling as she cradled Max closer. Oliver gave a subtle nod, his gaze fixed ahead. The moment was over, but the emotional weight of it lingered in the air, thick with the quiet acknowledgement that, in this moment, the guard had done more than his duty. He had shown heart. The crowd, who had been silently watching the exchange, now burst into excited chatter. The tourists, still in awe, exchanged stories of what they had just witnessed. Phones were raised in the air, capturing every moment. The rescue, though seemingly small, had turned into something much bigger, a story that would soon spread beyond the gates of Buckingham Palace. Within minutes, the scene had been captured on social media. Videos of the brave Royal Guard, holding Max gently in his arms, were shared across platforms, flooding feeds from London to Los Angeles. Headlines soon followed, each one more heartwarming than the last. Royal Guard rescues dog at Buckingham. Palace and Heroic Guard saves puppy from palace grounds. News outlets picked up the story, with anchors voicing their admiration for the calm and swift actions of the Guard. "That's what true British spirit looks like," one commenter wrote, their words echoing across the globe. Another added, "Finally a reason to smile today." The video spread like wildfire, catching the attention of millions, each viewer struck by the simplicity of the act and the sincerity behind it. The elderly woman, now reunited with her dog, remained at the gates for a while longer. Her gaze never left Oliver as he returned to his post. Her heart, still racing with gratitude, knew that words could never fully express what she felt. For Oliver, however, the moment was already a part of his past. He had done what he needed to do. No more, no less. His job, his duty, was to guard the palace, to protect the traditions and history that lay behind its walls. But today, his actions had gone beyond mere protocol. He had shown compassion, something that no amount of training could teach. As the last of the tourists left, their conversations filled with awe, the palace grew quiet again. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the stone courtyard. The story of the rescue, however, would linger far longer than the fading light. It would live on in the hearts of those who had witnessed it, a reminder that even in the most rigid traditions, there is room for kindness, for humanity, and for the small, heroic acts that can make all the difference. Oliver stood tall, his eyes fixed once again on the horizon, the stillness of his posture betraying none of the emotion he had just experienced. Beneath the stoic exterior, however, there was a quiet satisfaction, a sense of fulfillment that came from knowing he had done more than follow orders. He had protected a life, and in doing so, he had proven that courage isn't just about strength, but about having the heart to make a difference when it matters most. And as the evening sky darkened, the story of the brave royal guard and the little terrier would continue to spread, a moment of heroism and heart that had touched the world. Long after the palace gates had closed for the night, as the elderly woman walked away, holding Max securely in her arms, the atmosphere around Buckingham Palace seemed to settle into a quiet, almost surreal calm. The crowd, still buzzing with excitement, slowly began to disperse, their chatter filled with admiration for what they had just witnessed. Some were already talking about the unexpected heroism of the royal guard, while others snapped pictures of the palace, still processing the emotional moment that had just unfolded. Oliver, ever the professional, returned to his post as if nothing had happened. His stoic expression never wavered. His boots clicked methodically on the cobblestones, his body straightening back into the exact position he had stood in before. The crowd, although dispersed, had captured the moment forever on their phones, and the ripple effect was already beginning to spread. It didn't take long before the story began circulating far beyond the palace gates. The videos that had been recorded, showing Oliver rescuing Max, spread like wildfire across social media. People from around the world were sharing the footage, each post more enthusiastic than the last. Royal Guard saves dog at Buckingham Palace became the headline of the day, flooding feeds from London to New York, from Paris to Los Angeles. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story, with anchors and reporters praising the quick thinking of the Royal Guard. Heroism at its finest, one news anchor commented, their voice brimming with admiration. The story of Oliver's calm, measured response to the dangerous situation was inspiring, especially in a world where moments of true compassion seemed to be in short supply. That's what true British spirit looks like, one commenter wrote on a viral video. Another added, finally, something to smile about today. The elderly woman, still overwhelmed with emotion, remained near the gates. For a little while longer, her hands gently cradling Max as if she were afraid to let him go. Her face reflected gratitude, but also a quiet sense of amazement. She had witnessed something rare, an act of kindness and quick thinking in the midst of royal protocol. She looked over at Oliver, who stood silently at his post, his eyes fixed forward, seemingly unchanged by the whole event. She wanted to say more, to express just how deeply she had been touched, but the words wouldn't come. As she stood there, some tourists approached her, eager to see Max up close. They asked if they could pet the dog, taking turns snapping photos with him, completely unaware of the international fame the little terrier had just earned. Max, blissfully unaware of the attention, wagged his tail and lapped up the affection. To him, it was just another moment of joy, but for the rest of the world, it was a symbol of kindness, compassion, and the unexpected heroes who walk among us. By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the stone courtyard, Buckingham Palace had returned to its usual routine. The crowds had thinned out, and the grand gates stood silently once again. But the story of the heroic royal guard who had stepped off his post to save a dog would continue to live on in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. The video clips, now shared by millions, would ensure that the moment wasn't forgotten. It was more than just a heartwarming story. It was a reminder that no matter how high the stakes or how strict the protocols, humanity can always find a way to shine through. For Oliver, however, the moment was already in the past. He stood tall, eyes forward, posture flawless. But beneath the armor of duty, there was a quiet satisfaction. He had done something that, for him, was more important than tradition. He had made a difference. And though the world might never truly know the full extent of the impact of his actions, Oliver carried with him a sense of fulfillment, knowing that, in a world full of distractions and noise, he had acted with kindness and bravery when it mattered most. As the evening descended, Buckingham Palace stood still, bathed in the glow of the fading sunlight. The story of the royal guard and the little terrier, Max, would continue to resonate. A timeless reminder that heroism doesn't always come in grand gestures. It often comes in small, quiet moments of compassion, where heart and duty meet. And for the elderly woman, she would always remember the day she, too, witnessed the power of kindness under the shadow of royalty. As the sun began to dip behind Buckingham Palace, casting long shadows over the courtyard, the excitement from the day's event slowly began to fade into the evening calm. The crowd had mostly dispersed, their once loud conversations now reduced to quiet murmurs as they filtered out of the area. But the story of the brave royal guard, who had stepped off his post to rescue a small terrier, was far from over. It was only just beginning to unfold on a global scale. Max, now safely back in the arms of his elderly owner, had become an unlikely hero. The footage of his rescue, filmed by several tourists, was quickly circulating across social media platforms. People from around the world were sharing the clips, with captions filled with admiration for the calm and quick-thinking guard who had acted without hesitation. Headlines like, "Royal Guard saves dog at Buckingham Palace" and "Guard breaks protocol to rescue puppy" spread like wildfire, and within hours, the story was on every news outlet from London to New York. For the elderly woman, who had clutched Max close to her chest, the events of the day were overwhelming. She could hardly believe what had just happened. The guard, who had moments before been standing still and unmoving in the blazing heat of the sun, had somehow transformed into a hero in her eyes. Tears still welled in her eyes as she held Max tightly, her gratitude so overwhelming she didn't quite know how to express it. She wanted to thank Oliver properly, to tell him how much his actions had meant to her, but words seemed insufficient. She stood there for a moment longer, just watching him, her heart full of thanks. Oliver, for his part, was unchanged by the fuss. His posture remained impeccable, his face as stoic as ever. He had done his duty, and now he had returned to his post, just as protocol demanded. To him, this was nothing more than a routine duty, something he had been trained for. But deep down, even if he wouldn't admit it outwardly, there was a sense of quiet fulfillment. He had done something good today. And though the crowd's cheers had faded, and the cameras had stopped flashing, the impact of his actions would continue to ripple outwards. In the days that followed, the story continued to spread. People from all corners of the globe were commenting on the bravery and compassion displayed by the Royal Guard. News outlets carried the story, anchors beaming as they shared the feel-good moment of the year. Social media feeds were flooded with messages of admiration. "True British spirit," one user wrote. "Finally something to make me smile today," said another. The videos of Oliver rescuing Max, calm and composed as he scooped the little dog up and returned him to safety, were replayed again and again. For the tourists who had been there that day, it was an unforgettable moment. They had come to Buckingham Palace to see the famous Queen's Guard, to snap pictures and maybe even learn a bit about the royal traditions. Instead, they had witnessed a moment of pure humanity. They had seen a guard break protocol, not for attention or glory, but because he knew it was the right thing to do. Some of them had even approached the elderly woman, asking if they could pet Max and take pictures with him. completely unaware of the massive global impact the tiny dog had just made. As the evening turned to night, Buckingham Palace stood quietly, under the starlit sky. The crowds had gone home and the gates had closed for the day. But the story of that moment, of a royal guard stepping off his post to rescue a small dog, continued to live on in the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed it. It had transcended the physical walls of the palace, spreading across borders and cultures, reminding everyone who heard it that courage and kindness could be found in the most unexpected places. Oliver stood, ever vigilant, his eyes fixed ahead, but in his heart, he carried the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, even in the most rigid of traditions, there was always room for humanity. He had done what was right, not because he had to, but because he cared. And as the world continued to share the story of the brave guard and the little terrier, it was clear that this moment, this small act of kindness, would not soon be forgotten. The story lived on, in video clips, headlines, and in the hearts of people everywhere. It was a reminder that behind the ceremonial guards and grand traditions, there are people who carry not just duty, but heart. It was a lesson that heroism doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in the form of a simple, compassionate act that can change the course of someone's day, or even their life. And for the elderly woman and Max, it had certainly changed theirs. I'd love to hear what you think about today's story. Wasn't that moment incredible? The way the royal guard stepped off his post to save the little terrier? It's a perfect example of how kindness can shine through even in the most disciplined of professions. What did you think of the way the crowd reacted? It's amazing to see how a small act of compassion can have such a big impact, isn't it? I'm really curious. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and tell me your thoughts on this heartwarming moment. Do you think that kind of courage can be found in everyday life? Or maybe you've witnessed something similar yourself. I'd love to hear your stories or thoughts on this one. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of the upcoming stories we've got planned. We've got some amazing ones coming up, and you won't want to miss them. Share your thoughts with us, and let's keep this conversation going. I can't wait to read your comments.